I've always been an advocate of composers and performers getting back together again. They've actually separated in the last 2 centuries, and that's played havoc on the whole classical scene, because there's a performer's world and there's a composer's world, and often the two don't meet, or they don't understand each other, or they're in separate structures. I mean, there's soloists and conductors traveling around that hardly ever meet a composer. And since I was a performer, and since I work with performers, and I still perform and I conduct, I'm always trying to get these two people to get back together again. Most performers don't compose, and most composers don't perform actively. There are a few exceptions, like Bernstein was an exception, and Bill Balcom, who still plays quite a bit with his wife, and Lucas Foss. There are exceptions, but they're not many. And I think in the schools, actually, I'm teaching at a conservatory now at Bard, where I put in a requirement that all the performers need to take a composition class and compose. All the performers need to compose at least for 1 semester, if not more, so they get on the other side of the page and see what the page is that they're playing is about. So I'm constantly, sending young composers to young performers, and I'm a liaison all over the place with that. I think we've just gone too separately. The structures have gotten too separated out. It's very, very important for composers to be in this kind of setting, because you get some very good performers, and often you get traditional performers who haven't played much new music. And I think it's very important that the composer be present in these settings, and it's happening more and more across the country. The festivals are starting to get the idea that it might be important to have a composer, at least one, there. And sometimes they even commission them. That's starting to happen too. They're starting to see the importance of that. I just did a whole festival of women composers in New York called Notable Women with the Orchestra of St. Luke's. We're not at the stage where it's no problem. We're not at that stage yet, unfortunately. Because if you pick up any flyer from an orchestra or chamber series or anything, it's pretty much it's very unusual if there's a woman on that flyer. We still have a lot of work to do. So I don't mind being represented as a woman composer. I don't. Some women do. I don't. Some women didn't even want to be on that series that I did. They don't want to be associated with that kind of thing because they think it's a kind of a ghettoizing. I don't view it that way. I think we need more. And if it has to be a festival of women composers, fine. And I'm perfectly willing to do it. And in fact, the media went on that festival immediately. And the first question was, do we really need this? And my answer was what I just said to you. These reporters are responsible for all the flyers that come by their desks. And I said, just look at all your flyers. How many women are there on them? That was the end of that question. I grew up in South America playing percussion. And I also grew up dancing, and I love to dance. But I also played a lot of very difficult contemporary music from the 70s, and I really learned how to count. I'm a virtuosic counter. But I try to put that on the surface of the piece rather than as a conceptual, mathematical thing. It's not. It's I try to make it a visceral. I use rhythm as a visceral way of developing the piece. It's not complex in the sense that the music from the 70s was. It's very much on the surface of the piece, if you know what I mean. Bartók was not a big influence, except there's a motive that I got from his contrasts for clarinet, violin, and piano that seems to appear in every piece I write. I don't know how that happened. It's sort of like a stamp that got into my music. That's my only Bartók influence, basically. There's free zones of Debussy and also of jazz, because I was married to a jazz pianist for 10 years, and I heard a lot of jazz. There's a lot of jazz chords. But the real influences are Beethoven and Stravinsky. Beethoven, I played a lot of his music when I was growing up as a pianist, and what appeals to me is his what I call motivated architecture. He's very interested in where he's headed, and he uses rhythm and balances of actions, I call them, to maintain a huge, detailed kind of interest in what he's doing. And he takes risks, too. And so with him, it's more the large-scale, rhythmic layout that I'm very interested in. Stravinsky is also about rhythm, but it's a different kind of rhythm. It's not a, it's more of a, well, he's a terrific orchestrator, and I learned a lot about orchestration from him. But he also has a very sharp profile, which is rhythmically based from place to place. It's sort of like Beethoven, but it's not quite as developmental as Beethoven. But it's very sharp profile. The problem is that the risk has to work in the context of what's happening. A risk doesn't mean anything unless it's contextually relevant. And I work very hard at getting from place to place. I tell my students that all the time. They can write something beautiful, but if it's not in the right place, it's not going to be beautiful. You know, it has to have a context. And I work really hard at that. That's why I'm very slow, very, very slow composer. I just finished my first vocal piece, and it's for children's chorus, for the New York Youth Chorus, which is a terrific chorus that focuses on new music. And people were sending me words, right and left, writer friends of mine, director friends of mine. Oh my God, I was just, and I couldn't, I think this is a problem with a lot of composers actually from the past. There are the vocal composers who write with words easily. In fact, they can't start writing unless they have words. And that's the whole opera tradition. And then there's the instrumental tradition that the words are like, they interfere somehow, or they're imposed on it. And that's the whole instrumental history of composers. In fact, I know that Beethoven really did not like to write songs. He had the same reaction I did. Like, I read some letters where he said, I can't do this, this is like, you know. And it's because there's a overlaying of meaning. There's the musical meaning, and then there's the verbal meaning. And the two things for me are like oil and water. I don't know how you get them into the same space at the same time and have them both come out equally. I just don't, they just seem so incompatible. I can imagine doing a theater piece. I'm very dramatic and theatrical. I could do a theater piece, I think. But the minute you put music into it, I'm gone. I just can't. So anyways, this piece I'm writing is called Can I? And it's about children being heard. And I have them clapping, I have them whispering, I have them stomping, and I have percussion there, and I'll have all kinds of things going on just to avoid the words as long as possible. I'm actually having some help with this week. I'm not happy with the words. I'm happy with the music. I'm just not happy with the words. I don't care about the words. Schubert songs, which are beautiful. I don't care that it's the leaves floating in the breeze. You know, and Debussy songs in French. There's beautiful music there, those Debussy songs. But when it becomes partly theatrical, then all of a sudden the words start to get important because you're going to miss the motivation for the next action, you know. So in opera, it becomes more important, and musical theater becomes more important. But I think with me, it's that I want both. This piece is partly theatrical that I'm writing, so I want the words to be heard. But I just know that there are composers that have gone through this same struggle. I wish I could write a piece where nothing mattered. You know, I should just do the ocean or something, you know. I don't know what that is about. It's a very complex issue.